I want to start off by having you explain to us what does it like. What is a gradeless classroom? Is it really what I think it means when I hear gradeless classroom? What does that mean?
Mhm. So I think the term gradeless, I think we're starting to migrate to the term ungrading. So that's kind of where the term has mutated a little bit, which I think ungrading more captures the essence of what happens. Um, so basically, what gradeless or ungrading is the first thing I always explain to people is that we can't get around attaching a grade to student work. Like we can't get around that. There
Mhm.
has to be a grade attached. Unfortunately, it's the system that we're in, and it has to do with things like transcripts. Students at the high school level have to have a transcript that they send off to colleges. But what happens along the way is you don't attach a grade until the end of either the end of the course or the end of the marking period, or in my case we have trimesters in the school where I am. So what that ends up being is that the students end up having a lot more say in the grade that they earn, because in my situation they grade pitch. So that's kind of how that works with mine, and it's done differently depending upon what the setting is, what the situation is. A lot of people come to gradeless because they do standards based and they actually work in tandem pretty well with one another. But really what it is it is that you remove the grade as a barrier to student learning.
Mm.
So
So
that's kind of where that ends up.
now are students doing assignments, and like when they turn in an assignment, you give it like what happens after that? Like how does that work?
So I can't get around like inputting something into the system, like and we have to, and honestly, I think some of the confusion with teachers, because we frequently hear things like, if I don't attach a grade to this, my students won't do it.
Mhm.
And that was my thinking at one point in time too, so I don't ever judge that. But it was my experience when I was attaching grades to every single assignment, is that you still had students that wouldn't do it anyway. So it doesn't fix whether or not a student is going to do the work. What it does is, say for example, I collect. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I did today.
Okay.
We have been working the last several days on building understanding of how rhetorical appeals are created. And so what we've done a layer of work with that. And what I wanted to do was to assign something formative so that I had an opportunity to be able to see what the learning actually looked like based on the instruction I delivered the last 3 days. So I had the students submit a paragraph based on what they analyzed in terms of some advertising. They submitted that today. And I went through, and while they were working on something else, I went through and looked at where they were to get an idea of, are they actually applying the concept of being able to rhetorically analyze the advertising. And it gave me a really good idea of what the students were understanding and what they weren't and where they were. So what I do is I input in our learning management system. We use Schoology, and our Schoology learning management system imports to our um, online gradebook. So some schools around the state of Delaware use Power School. We use eSchool. So I input that the student has submitted the assignment, and then what I do is I provide feedback about how the student did with that assignment. What that allows for is, it allows for the student to get more immediate feedback on their work. It allows me to almost instantaneously focus on any instruction I need to adjust right away. But it also gives the students the ability to be able to go, here is some evidence of where I am with my learning. Because what happened when I was doing things more traditionally is I would deliver the lesson. The students would do an assignment. They would turn it in. I would put feedback on it. The student looked for the grade. The paper went into the binder, into the trash can, onto the floor, and they did nothing with it because they were looking for what was my grade and then did nothing with it. I tried doing a strategy called delaying the grade where I wouldn't put a grade on it, and then I would put on feedback. The kids would then, like, had the ability to resubmit, but that wasn't translating into the students actually applying the feedback either. So what ended up happening is when I decided to move to Gradeless, I don't attach a grade to it. If the student does not, through their work, demonstrate that they are applying the concepts, I hand it back to them. I mark it as incomplete and indicate that they have been given feedback. I would like them to resubmit. So over a trimester, the students collect, evidence of their work, and they do a lot of reflecting. And that's a process that really has to be taught to students because they don't understand how to naturally reflect. No, let me back up a little bit. I find my best reflectors are my student athletes because they are constantly getting feedback from their coaches. Mm-hmm. And they are usually really good. Also, my performing arts kids are fantastic when it comes to applying feedback because they are in constant, learning to play an instrument is all formative. So I find that they also are really receptive to feedback and looking to improve. What's happened over time is that by removing the grade, they have a much clearer idea about what their own learning looks like. And when we get to the end of the trimester, when they grade pitch, they have an opportunity to be able to show a collection of their work.
Okay.
And here is the evidence of my learning. And I explained to them, I was like, you can't come to me at the end of the trimester and be like, I think I deserve a 92%. Because the first thing I'm going to say is, okay, great. Where's your evidence of your learning? And I have a series of questions that they follow and they work with that. And if they can't produce evidence, then we can't go with a 92. Like you have to have evidence of your learning. I have had several students have to repitch because they don't come with anything. And then they're like, I think I should be at an 86%. And it's like, well, but where's the evidence of you having done the work and learned and they'll just kind of look at me and I'm like, okay, you are going to have to repitch. And I'm like, this is not heading in a direction that's going to, one, demonstrate to me you're learning anything, and two, bode well for you. Like, this is not going to wind up being a situation that where you are going to be able to obtain this grade that you're pitching because there's no evidence of you having learned the things. And so what it's ended up doing is put a lot of the ownership of the learning onto the student. And so that's kind of how I've been able to make that work. I know that there are people who do their Gradeless a little differently. That's how that looks. I tried doing contract grading this year with one of my classes because the requirements that we had to work on were very, very specific. And it was almost a checklist of tasks that had to be done. And I'm like, I don't know that Gradeless is going to be fitting for this because it doesn't work. So I tried the contract grading. And I will be honest with you, it works for a lot of people. It didn't work as well for me. Okay. Because I really am growth minded. Like, I want to see your growth and I want to see how you grew and how you can demonstrate what you've learned. And so I was not as big a fan of that. If I give it another shot, maybe I'll do it differently next time. But that Gradeless has worked well for me. And I've not, until I've done this, could really have a conversation around what student learning looked like in my classroom. It just, I couldn't tell you because we have a set of standards, obviously, that we have to be able to, make the foundation of our lesson. And I couldn't really have those conversations. I can have them now because I'm much more attuned to what the students are actually learning.